Hi, everyone. My name is Nara. I'm the workshop and education coordinator for GreenThumb with Claudia. Really excited to be out in a garden. Maple Street Community Garden is beautiful. You guys are doing such an amazing job, and thank you so much for that introduction. I really think this garden has like a very special and inspiring story and like lots of lessons for folks starting community gardens all over the city, so thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to talk about drip irrigation today, and to the church bells are so distracting. It's like wonderful and beautiful, and I love listening to them, and it feels wrong to talk over them. Okay, so I love drip irrigation for a lot of reasons. One, because it makes watering so much easier. You can hook up a hose to a drip system, set it, and set a timer, come back in an hour, turn it off, and all your crops are watered. You could also hook it up with a timer. I've personally never had very good luck using timers in the past, but Lory has, and so I'm hoping to learn from her experience with that. And then if you have experience with drip irrigation, or if you have like pros and cons that you've experienced in your garden with drip irrigation, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. I think we all have a lot to learn from each other, because the thing that I love about putting together drip irrigation systems is there really is no one-size-fits-all. You can buy a kit, which I recommend starting with, and it's just a lot of puzzle pieces, and you might not need all the pieces. You might need more of something or less of something else than comes in your kit, but it gives you an opportunity to really learn about what all of these pieces do. The handout that we sent, hopefully you got it via email from Brooklyn Botanic Garden, goes a little bit into like the pros and cons as to why, mostly the pros, as to why you would want to use drip irrigation. So besides making water easy, right? I'm sure we've all worked at sites where you could be standing hand watering for 4 hours and like get nowhere in the heat of the summer. It also does a great job of watering just the soil line. For the most part, across the board, plants do not want their leaves wet. They want to stay like dry and free in the sun, and then we water the soil so that the plant roots can then take up the water and the nutrients in the soil. And it's important to just water the soil, and sometimes it's very hard to do. So by using drip irrigation, we're literally laying tape down onto the soil and releasing water just onto the soil. When we do that, the nice byproduct of that is that we end up saving a lot of water. So by directly watering the soil a little bit at a time over a long period of time, they're then say like using a sprinkler system. The oscillators are super fun, love them in the summer, brings out the child in me, but it wastes a lot of water, especially if you're doing it in the summer. Most of that water is evaporating, and it's also getting the plant leaves wet, which makes them more susceptible to disease, pathogens, fungal like issues, things like that. So a lot of reasons to use drip irrigation. And so today we're going to talk about hooking up a drip irrigation system to a hose that might be attached to either a fire hydrant or an internal water system. You would have to do a little bit of extra steps to hook it up to rainwater harvesting. And I can talk about that, I think, over here. Does that sound good? Any other like introductory things about drip irrigation? Love it. Nailed it. Great. Thank you. Okay. So I recommend starting with, like I mentioned, I recommend starting with kind of like a prefab kit and going from there. And there are a bunch of vendors that sell these things. Dripworks has like garden raised bed kits. Johnny's Selected Seed has them. Gardener Supply has them. You'll find them like all over the place. The important thing is to just pick one and stick with it, because if you need replacement parts, it's easiest to go with the vendor you bought it from. But a lot of them are actually interchangeable in the end. The other reason I recommend starting with a kit is because if you're designing a drip irrigation system for a large site, there's a lot of math you could do. You could choose to do all of the math ahead of time. And the GreenThumb handout walks through how to do that math. However, you could also kind of trial and error it. Like it doesn't have to be, if you buy the kit, you set it up how you want to, you figure out the little pieces, and from there you could say, all right, we need more of these elbows. Okay, we need like 50 more feet of this kind of tape. And you can do it in stages and build out your system step by step and avoid a lot of the headaches of doing like a whole lot of math. So that's my recommendation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the math though. When you're buying a kit or when you're setting up a kit, if you call one of the vendors for help, which you can do, they have a lot of experienced people. If you call their customer service lines to talk through your design and talk through what you're trying to do, they're going to ask you if you know what your water pressure is, if you know, like, basically how fast is the water coming out of your hose. And it's going to vary, right? It's going to vary. If you're hooking this up directly to a fire hydrant, a lot of water is going to come out of here. If you're hooking this up to a rainwater harvesting system, that water might be a little bit slower. And drip irrigation systems are usually rated for some kind of water flow. And so you can read about that on the website, or you can call and talk to them. What I did to find out what the water flow was here was we filled up this 5-gallon bucket full of water. Can you see it? We filled up this 5-gallon bucket full of water, and it's a known volume, right? We know it's 5 gallons, and I timed it, and it came out to 59 seconds exactly, which I fudged up to 60 because that was more easily divisible by 5. You want to know how many seconds it takes to fill up 1 gallon, and then you can look at the handout, the GreenThumb handout, and there's a little chart in there that tells you how that translates to gallons per hour. And so 60 seconds to fill up a 5-gallon bucket, 12 seconds to fill up a 1-gallon bucket means, looking at the chart, that we have 300 gallons per hour that we're working with. And so that's like a piece of information that if you were to call one of these vendors to say, all right, I'm looking to build out a system for my garden, they'll ask you if you know that number, the gallons per hour number, and that's how you figure that out. Before we did that, let's walk over to the spigot and show the other pieces. So the hose is hooked up. The hose is hooked up to a fire hydrant, which Maple Street Community Garden has put in like a little PVC pipe to make it easier to access. So we hooked up, there are a few pieces you need to hook up before hooking up your hose. One of them is a filter, and there's also a pressure regulator. So this is both a filter and a pressure regulator. Usually these are 2 separate pieces, and you would put the filter on first, which is important because your drip irrigation system can clog if there's no filter on it, which would, you know, it would break in a matter of weeks probably if you didn't have a filter. The filter is really important. After that, you would have a pressure regulator, and usually in the kits, they sell them at 30 PSI. It's just a number that informs how fast the water is moving through. I think it's really important to have the pressure regulator, especially if you're hooking up to a fire hydrant, because we know water is like coming really fast out of the hydrant. And you don't want to bust your drip irrigation system. If the water is coming out too fast, it could just like bust all the joints and like water will be spraying out everywhere. So you want to have the filter and the pressure regulator. Both of those usually come with a standard kit. Optionally, you can also add a timer onto this. So Lory lent us this like amazing looking solar timer that she uses for her rooftop garden. And these come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, durabilities. Some of them hook up by Bluetooth, so you could like use a phone app to turn on your garden water. Like there's some magic happening there. Lory, do you want to talk anything about the timer? Sure. Just wait till Claudia unmutes you.
I talk or
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good? Okay. I have experimented with a couple of different timers. The first timer I got was a battery-operated timer, pretty much the cheapest of the cheap timers, just in line from your spigot to your hose. And because I'm sure they're designed to work, but for me, because you're putting a battery in a thing that's outside all the time, I think it's risky, and water got in and the batteries corroded and the thing was not revivable. So then I did the research on the solar timers, and the one that I have now is sort of second generation. The things that you want to be really aware of is not leaving them connected and outside after you start to get freezing temperatures, because if one night's worth of freeze in the body of the thing, it captures water. So if it freezes one night, it's enough to crack the housing. And you can buy replacements, which I have done, but it's a massive drag. And they've been making improvements about on the sort of computer end of it. So the last time I had to buy replacements, I had to get a whole new thing because the computer part had been upgraded. But this is, I think it's made by Dig, and it's been working for a couple of years, and it seems great. And you can program it for multiple days, every day, and times of day, and duration that it leaves the water turned on. So for my green roof, I have it come on 3 mornings a week for 10 minutes at a time, and that seems to work best for us.
Thank you. And so Lory was
Lory was kind enough to lend us a whole lot of pieces for this workshop today. We were hoping to be able to buy a whole kit for the garden so that we could show you what that looks like, and we weren't able to. These are a mix of pieces from, am I muted? You can hear me, okay. These are a mix of brands, and so I just want to show you what that looks like. So these pieces are from Dripworks, and they have this like twisting functionality, and these are the ones that I like using. We're going to use these because you can, you can plug the tube on and then twist it tight. And then it also has a little number on there to show you what size you're working with. These are all interchangeable. We also have these pieces that are from a different brand, and these you kind of like plug it in, and once it's in, it's very tight, and we're finding it's like hard to take out if you get it in there. So there are these like 2 different brand pieces, and so I think it's just up to you, like what this is, you kind of want to like find one and stick to it, and that's the way I would go with these things. So we're going to use the Dripworks ones that have the twisting capability, because it's a little bit more interchangeable. If you decide to use a different system next time, you can just take it apart. And a lot of I would recommend taking your drip irrigation apart at the end of every season and storing it dry in the shed. All of the pieces react to freezing and thawing in the similar way that Lory was explaining. You'll find a lot more like rips and tears and holes if you leave the drip irrigation out over the winter than if you take it apart, put it away. Yeah.
Am I still unmuted?
You're muted, so you have to, Claudia has to unmute you. Okay. You might hear a little beep, and then you're, okay, go ahead.
Oh, I can't hear the beep. I just wanted to say that these are, all of these fittings are not very expensive. The kind with this quick connect where you can cinch it down by tightening this collar around the end of the tube are so user-friendly that they're totally worth the extra money, in my opinion, than the ones where you shove a piece of tubing in, because you can never use this again, or if you want to use it again, you have to work really hard to get this stub of tubing out so that you can connect it to something else. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, that in terms of drip irrigation fittings, for me, it seems like it's well worth it to get the Cadillac version.
All right.
Let's go back over here. Okay. So we timed our water knowing that we have the pressure regulator, the filters hooked up. So, and then we timed filling up the bucket so that we knew what, with all those pieces attached, what our water flow rate was. And if you want to do the math, that means we have 300 gallons per hour to work with, and we're going to be working with this 1/4-inch drip tape. This cute, really easy to work with stuff that has holes every 8 inches, 6 inches? Okay. Holes every 6 inches. And you can find this out through the vendor, but the 1/4-inch drip tape that we're looking at is rated at 0.8 gallons per hour per emitter, which is what they call each of the little holes. So each of those little holes is rated to go up to 0.8 gallons per hour water flow out of each one. And so if you take 300 gallons per hour divided by 0.8 gallons per hour, that means we can have up to 375 feet of that 1/4-inch drip tape in one zone. And so for a small garden like this, we might be able to cover the entire, all of the raised beds in 375 feet. But for example, in this one bed, which is 10 feet.
Yeah, this is 10.
So the garden beds here are 10 feet. Usually in a lot of community gardens, they're 8 feet. If we wanted to lay down multiple lines of drip tape, so if we wanted to, this garden bed has 4 different rows of crops. So if we wanted to do a row next to this cilantro, a row next to these peppers, a row next to these peppers, and a row next to the parsley, that's 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, which is 40 feet. So that's 40 feet out of our 375 feet that we've now just taken. So once we do this bed, we're now down to 335 feet that we could then use in the rest of the garden. So hopefully that makes sense. This is the kind of math you can do optionally. If you're building out a larger site, we'll talk about what that means actually over here. So the first step to setting up a drip irrigation system is mapping out where you want your mainline tubing. And so this is called mainline. It has no holes in it. It's just going to carry water like a hose. And this is how you get the water to each of the raised beds. And then we're going to use some of it to get the tube up and over and inside the raised bed. And this, you could basically cut pieces of it however you need to cut it. Claudia, can you share the PowerPoint? So Maple Street had a map of their garden already, which is pretty amazing. If you don't have a map of your garden, I recommend making one. It doesn't have to be super high tech. Theirs is digital. Yours can be on a piece of paper. But this is how you can start to lay out where you actually want to put this stuff down and how you want it to then get up and into each bed. So Claudia, once you're able to share that PowerPoint, just, okay, click through to the 3rd slide. So because we weren't able to get the full kit, I didn't really talk to Arlene or Lory about how they wanted this set up. So we're doing this just as an example so that we can work in this raised bed to demonstrate what it looks like to hook up one raised bed to drip irrigation. But you want to be strategic with how you lay your main line. And so you can start with an end that looks like this end piece. And this is just one of those pieces that has like the twist, like all of the other ones. And so this is the piece that you can then connect to a hose. So you want this at the beginning of your main line. So to hook it up, I'm making sure that it's twisted all the way back. And then I can push it in all the way and then tighten it down. And now it's tight on there. So this is how I start my main line. And then using various pieces like this T piece, we can cut pieces, send it up the raised bed, or send it down a garden row to some more raised beds down there. Can send it back this way to some more raised beds back there. This is where we start to craft where we want it to go, and it's important to map out that your plan first before going for it. So the pink lines are just an example of what that might look like. This garden is going to decide how they want that main line set up. However works best for them, wherever their water's coming from, they want to make sure it's as easy as possible to hook up this zone. So if we need more than 375 feet of that drip tape, then we can have more than one zone. So if this is one zone where we hook up the hose here, everything's attached to it, and it's gonna water like these, 7 raised beds. Great. I've watered my beds. Let's say this is hooked up for an hour. Beautiful. I'm now going to turn my water off. Oh yeah, you can also use this. This is another handy way to do it. There's so many pieces out there. Look at this cool thing. You can hook up a hose here, and you can hook up so much main line all across the board here and water a bunch of different areas. And with these valves, you can decide, all right, like the apple trees don't need water today, but the vegetables needed water today. Or like, the vegetables don't need, the tomatoes don't need water right now, right? Like tomatoes are very drought tolerant, but excuse me, the lettuce does need to be watered. I love having options. Thank you. So you can set up multiple zones so that you're not watering everything at once. And also, if your garden is like much bigger than this, then you might not be able to water everything at once. If you hook everything up to the main line and you don't have enough gallons per hour to really fill that out, the drip is going to come out very slow. It might not make it all the way to the end of the line. So you want to just find that sweet spot in between where your water flow is coming from and how much space you want to cover. Okay.
Water.
What? Water. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to start looking at some of these pieces. And these are just some of the pieces that come in a kit, and you can play around with them. You can decide if you like them or not. I think every raised bed should have one of these pieces that has a valve, and that way you can decide, if this piece is hooked up to this raised bed, when you're going to turn on your drip irrigation, you can decide whether or not this particular bed gets watered. Like maybe you didn't plant out this bed yet, so you don't want to water it yet, but that bed is planted out. You leave the valve open for that bed. You can close it on this bed. Go ahead and turn on your drip. Voila, you're good. So you okay.
She's not muted.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is a valve. Love it. One per raised bed. This is an elbow piece. You can use this to get up over. We can use it to get down here. You can use it, wherever you need a 90-degree angle. This is a T connector, a T-shaped piece. And this is what we would use down here to break open the main line and send a direction up here. You have ones like this that just connect in a straight line. So let's say one year, let's say this year, Maple Street decided to use a bunch of these elbow pieces to get up and over, which leaves them with a bunch of small pieces of the drip line. Next year, they might decide, Lory was showing me, they might decide to run some PVC pipe instead so that they're not using so many of these elbow pieces, simplifying the system, maybe drilling a hole in the side. So they might have a different system next year, and they could use a bunch of these pieces connected with each other in a different way. The main line comes with something that looks like this, or that might look like a landscape fabric staple that you can use to hold it down. So I have one here so that I don't trip on it this whole time. And that keeps it down. I recommend once you have your main line laid out like this, that you cover your garden with wood chips. And then it's buried, it's not exposed to people stepping on it, tripping on it, it's not exposed to the elements or the weather. Just covering this with wood chips is a good idea to protect it throughout the season. I would still pull it up at the end of the season though, so you just have to remember where it is. Okay, so we're gonna have some fun with these pieces and just see where it goes. And yeah, like I think, sure. Yeah, I think the main thing I want to stress is that there really is no one right way to do this. And so I'm going to show one method, and then we might talk about like other ways that we could do it if we wanted to. So my goal is to send some of the main line up and over and across so that then I can attach the drip line out into the plant. So I'm just going to cut this as straight as I can, like as perpendicular. Get my P-piece. I want to make sure that all of these are the same size. Sometimes they sell T-pieces that like hook up a wider main line to a smaller piece of main line. And so I'm looking for the number 600 on all of these. It's there. Great. So I'm pushing these all the way back. That's true. Yeah, Lory was just saying that it's nice to do this on a warm, sunny day because if you leave the tubing out in the sun, it gets softer and more pliable and easier to work with. Okay. So that's one. Need some of it to come up this way. So you can measure it, you could eyeball it. So I'm gonna okay. And then I want one of these elbow pieces. Then we need, so we could, I made it a little long, so we could have it like exactly here, a short little piece, and then another elbow coming down this way. I'm gonna, yeah, we have this like tiny little piece here. Well, this one I cut off because I put a goop slug in it.
I have another one if you want it.
I think I'm just gonna do this. Oh, you know what? I forgot to add the valve onto it. So this will be perfect. This is actually a different size. So I had wanted to add a valve onto this, and I didn't do that. So what I'm going to do is, yeah. So this is, again, why I love these pieces, because I made a mistake already, and I can just take it apart and try again.
The whole world is lots of makes it easier.
Yeah.
Practice on.
Mhm.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So I'm using this as an opportunity now to show just how versatile these pieces are. So if I want a valve in there, I'm going to take out, let's cut it here. So again, this valve piece gives us the option to turn off or on this particular raised bed if we're watering our entire zone. And then just need a tiny little piece. Yeah. Now I'm attaching my elbow again. You could take a bracket and attach this to the bed so that it doesn't become a tripping hazard. And then I think we can do another small little piece, little elbow, and then use this to get down. So there are a lot of different combinations and designs that you can use. Claudia, if you could put the link into the chat for the Dripworks guide. It's a lot of information, not all of what you need, but there are some diagrams in there that can show you this piece connects to this piece that connects to this piece, so that you can have that in visual drawing form instead of having to look back at this webinar, which you can also do. So now this hangs nicely, and I can get one more elbow piece to bring us out into the bed. All right. So I need one more piece of this mainline tubing that's going to now come across the bed. So about here. There are a few different pieces for closing an end like this. There are some that have like a cap that you can put on. There are these little figure eights. That's what I'm going to use in this case so that it's easier to undo if they want to use this piece for something else. I also love them just because they're so simple. But we put it over one end. It's like purposely creating a kink in your hose. And then you push it back over and just tighten it as much as it'll go. So that's one way to close off the end. All right. So I want this to lay flat. I'm going to use these pins to hold it down. All right, and now I can think about the next step. So I want to use this 1/4 inch. Actually, before we do that, is this another cute little piece? We have to hook this back up. So I'm just hooking up the rest of the main line so that if we wanted to, we can connect other raised beds down the row. Okay. So in this system now, we can hook up a hose at this end. It runs water down here, sends some water up here. We can just tell it not to send water up there, and then sends more water down here onto our other raised beds. So there are a few ways to do this part. We're just going to show one of them, which is that we're going to hook up this 1/4 inch drip line directly to the main line here. And then we'll talk about some other options that you could do instead if you didn't want to do it that way. So these pieces all talk to each other, which I love. The 1/4 inch drip line comes with a variety of different plugs that you can use. This is the one we'll use to hook it up to the plastic tubing. You can use these to hook it up to each other, I think, or these sprinklers.
That one's an end one, but there are some where you can hook it up. You can.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an end one. You put this on the end to close it off. This one.
Shut off.
There's so many. They're like these tiny little pieces. You can mix and match however you want your system to look. And then the kit comes with this little hole poker, which we can use to just poke a hole. Use my connector piece. It makes a really satisfying pop that I don't think you're going to be able to hear, but just know that it happened. You heard it. And then we can take our end and plug it in. Okay. So that's the main thing that's going on. So the emitters are where these bulges are, and that's where the drops of water are going to come out. And it's not terribly important for them to line up exactly with where your plants are. The idea with drip irrigation is that it's going to water your plant roots, which are spread out throughout the soil, and underneath the water, it kind of looks like it's creating a little triangle or bell. So the water is like spreading out throughout the soil. You just might not see it at the surface, and that's okay. So it doesn't have to line up exactly where every single plant is. It's fine how it is. And so we can use these little hooks to lay it where we want it to go. All right. So one option is to hook up basically 4 of these lines to align with each row of plants. And then you would cut this at the end, making sure not to cut into one of the emitters. You want to cut somewhere in between. Cut there and put one of the end pieces in. I'm not going to demonstrate that today because I want Lory to be able to use this for whatever the garden needs to use it for. The other option is to wind it. So you can now just plug this in down here, wind it back, zigzag it all the way through. You can zigzag it throughout. You can do 2 rows instead of 4. You could do 6 if you're doing something intensive like carrots or salad greens. What I love about these systems is that you get to decide, and if you use materials like this that you can take apart and reuse every year, then you're not stuck with any one design. Like you're not stuck always having only 4 rows forever in this bed. If next year they decide to do arugula or like baby salad greens or something and they want 7 rows in here, or they want a zigzag, they can switch it up and just do that instead.
Mara, sorry to interrupt, just that the image looks kind of pixelated. Okay. For like 2 minutes, it's looked a little bit pixelated. It's hard to see what you're doing. I'm not sure what's up with the image, but just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I'm mostly just talking at this point. Lory, do you want to add anything?
I think the one thing that I will add is if you do a zigzag with the dripping middle.
Okay, I think can you unmute Lory?
If you do a zigzag with this drip emitter line, you can just send it back to the main line. You can connect the other end, the open end, back to the all the way back to the front main line with another transfer barb, so that the whole run is pressurized. And I think then you get the most even coverage coming out of the drippers all the way along.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Do we have any questions?
Yes, 1 second. I'm just gonna mute Lory. Okay. We had one question. Would love to hear about drip irrigation in conjunction with rain barrels.
Yeah, okay. So that one is a little bit harder. The best thing you could do if you're doing drip in conjunction with rain barrels is to lift your rain barrels up as high as you're comfortable letting them go. If they're at ground level, then you want basically gravity to provide the water pressure. And so the higher they are, the more water pressure you have. If they're at ground level, or if it's a cistern below ground, you're going to need a pump. And that's fine. There are pumps out there for ponds. There are pumps out there for hooking up your drip irrigation to rainwater harvesting systems. There are solar-powered pumps. I don't have any experience using those, so I can't really speak to them. The the 1/4 inch drip tape is the best suited for low pressure systems. It can go down. They're rated for up to 30 PSI, but can go all the way down to 2. With this kind of tape, there's other kind of tape that's like bigger and wider that like looks actually just like black tape, like it will flatten when it's not full of water. Those are not as best suited for low pressure systems. So when you're calling a vendor to find out what you should be buying, you would just have to specify that you're using like a gravity, like low pressure system. And then you might just have to have more zones so that you have like these 3 beds are connected as one zone, those are connected as a separate zone, and you're watering each of those separately. You would also definitely want a really good filter because, you know, we don't necessarily know what's coming off the rooftops, and you want to make sure you're filtering out any particulates or any scum or any algae, anything that could gunk up your system. Any other questions? Did I answer that one? All right.
Thank you, Mara. Yeah, so your video is off, just so you know. We can't see right now. And I turned off mine just to see if that would help. I don't know, but okay, so we got a question. We have a question for Lory. Could you repeat that last bit about the zigzagging and options for change? Got distracted with the visual. Video is back on. Let me just unmute Lory, mute Mara, mute myself. All right, Lory, you're on.
Yeah, so in answer to the question about zigzagging, so Mara was saying if you have drip emitter line like this and you want to zigzag it through a bed, you've got the zigzag running around here, but you have this open end to the tubing. And if you don't cap this off, then water's going to just shoot out the end of the tube and not really build up enough pressure to come out the little emitters here. And in my experience, what I found is it rather than putting like another little drip fitting on the end that allows that means that the pressure, water pressure inside this tubing is going to be lower than you would if you capped it off completely. I found that you get the most even pressure throughout the length of the tube if you go and connect it back to the main line. So this main line would have water pressure from the filter pressure regulator over at the hose bib coming all the way over here. And then as you transfer into these little tiny lines, some of the pressure is lost. But if you connect at both ends, then it seems to me anyway, unscientifically, that you build an even pressure throughout the whole line rather than perhaps having a lot of water coming out that, you know, if you didn't connect this back, you might have a lot of water coming out the drip emitters close to the first connection, and then like you might have no water coming out down the end. So you can connect it back and then you get water coming out through all the emitters all along. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Lory. Okay. Does anyone else
talk about the little sprinklers and stuff that they?
Oh yeah.
You want to do that?
Go ahead. There's so many more pieces.
Am I still unmuted?
You're not muted, and also we don't have any other questions, so that would be great if you can talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So so we showed you this drip emitter tube, but we also have tubing, 1/4 inch tubing like this that doesn't have any drip emitters along the side. It's just basically a smaller version of this mainline tubing. And like we were saying earlier, there's all kinds of little fittings for this 1/4 inch tube, and they're all really cheap and they're kind of fun if you like Legos like I do. This one is a shut-off valve, so I can put this in line here, and I can turn on and off this this line, the water coming out. This is a drip emitter, just one. So if you wanted to, instead of having a whole line of a dripping tube, you could just have water coming out one. We have all these great ones. This is a drip emitter that's on a stake. So like if you had a potted plant and you wanted to run a 1/4 inch line to it, you'd stick this drip emitter in the end of the line. And because it's low pressure, it stays on. If we have too much pressure in the line, the water pressure would pop this thing off. Then you just put it next to your plant in your pot. Some really great ones back over at the table that are like little, oh yeah, this one. This one's really cute. Let's see if this comes back off. This is like a little sprinkler head. So you pop it on the end of the tube here, and you can dial in, like you can open it up and the sprinkles will go out further, and you can close it down and they'll come in closer. So you can kind of regulate how much water comes out of this little sprinkler. I don't know, it's a good thing, really. That's super cute to have. And you can either just leave it like resting near a plant, use one of these little stakes to clip onto the tube and hold it in place like that. You can also, if you wanted to, look for a T fitting in here. You wanted to have like a bunch of these coming off a main line. Like if I were to cut this, have this going like this, cut this, put this here, you know, you could make a row of little sprinklers basically. I'm describing this properly without cutting this tube, which I can do.
Can you close up on it? Babbie, can you close up on the sprinkler that that Lory's mentioning, or what she's pointing to? We're just having a little bit of a hard time seeing the video.
So what I'm doing essentially is making my own, like I can make a little row of little sprinkler emitters, and instead of having drips, you could have little sprinklers all down a line if you wanted to. So there's lots of ways that you can tailor the watering system for the kind of plants that you have, and whether they're in pots or beds or they're in the ground like a farm situation, there's plenty of things to do. Oh, and the last thing that I will say is they also sell these things. They're all on a little breakaway, but this is called a goof plug. So if you make a hole in your main line and you decide you don't want it there after all, you can pull out what you don't want there anymore, and instead of just having like your main line is ruined and there's water shooting out of it, you can put, oh sorry, my hands are kind of in the way, you can put a little goof plug in the hole, and so it doesn't leak anymore.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Lory. We're right at 1 p.m. So just wanted to thank Mara and Lory from GreenThumb and Lory from Maple Street Community Garden for hosting this great workshop. And now I'm going to stop the recording. We'll make sure to send it to you.